and welcome to Off the Shelf, the half-termary library vlog. I'm Mr. Humphreys.
And I'm Miss Ria.
Now this is an all-new version of Off the Shelf. We've got some new and improved features, which we'll tell you about later. But as always, we will start with some book recommendations of new arrivals in the library. So my first choice, and this is aimed for Year 7 to 9, of course, is Sadie and Her Shadow Beasts. Now, at first glance, I thought this was like a sort of middle grade fantasy. One of those sort of fantasy epics, which features like, weird and wonderful exotic creatures. But actually, the shadow beasts are beasts that reside inside Sadie's head. And essentially, they're like emblems of inner turmoil because she has recently lost her mother. So she's grieving. And it's sort of like physical, well, inside her head, physical manifestations of that. Now, she's a very creative person, she's a bit of a poet, and she tends to see things in colours, but these beasts are like colourless, representing sort of the colour and the joy that's drained out of her life. And the beasts, as well as being inside her head, they sort of cause her to act up and wreak havoc in her daily life interactions. Now, we've had some great books on the process of grief in the YA world. Monster Calls by Patrick Ness is probably the most obvious example, and that was a classic. Now, this might well be spoken of in the same breath in years to come. It's a really sort of powerful tool on how grief affects us all, and it can take over our lives, and it provides a very immersive experience. It says here that the main character's got a little quote from here on the back. It says, "Words get me." So basically books get us in a way that nothing else can. Only books can do this, and so this looks like a great book for dealing with the grieving process, which is something sadly all of us have to go through. So that's my first recommendation. Next up, we've got My Own Lightning by Lauren Walk. Now, Lauren Walk, I hope, is an author that those of you in Year 8 will recognise from when you had your anthology lessons when you were in Year 7. Wolf Hollow was the book that you studied there. Now, this is the sequel to Wolf Hollow. Yes. It picks up from where the events of Wolf Hollow left off. There's a big dramatic turn of events that ended that book. And it's suffice to say they were very seismic and they changed the lives of everyone. And so it's kind of like a bit of a turning point of a moment that it ends on, almost a cliffhanger. Now this picks up where it ended, but something very dramatic happens early on. It's called My Own Lightning, and that's because the main character, Annabelle, gets struck by lightning.
Oh.
Yeah. You can't get much more dramatic than that. That's fair to say, and hence the title. But she then gets revived and saved, but she doesn't know who the stranger is who's revived her. So she's trying to piece that together.
It's a bit of a mystery as well.
Yeah, and even more mysterious. There's some sort of side effects to this. She can sort of respond, interact with the animals around her in a way that she couldn't before. It's almost like a supernatural element. So it's so it's an interesting concept, and it picks up where we left off. Now, Lauren Walk is a very talented author. She's been Carnegie shortlisted, and it's Wolf Hollow did have there's a bit of devastation to that. Whereas this promises to be a more hopeful and uplifting follow-on from that. So she's a very talented author. So definitely worth checking out, especially if you enjoyed Wolf Hollow. And then my last choice, we have this beautifully illustrated collection called Drawn Across Borders by George Butler. Now, this is a sort of a very sensitive and sympathetic account of the refugee experience, essentially. And it's based on true stories, true refugees from various places, various countries. And the illustrations, I don't know how well you can see this, but just to give you an example, the illustrations are very evocative of the place. So I've got Iraq here, and you can it's just a very stark illustration of the circumstances of Iraq. And then moving on, you can see so it's it's really evocative of the place, and it really brings to life the sort of refugee experience in a very powerful, visually powerful way. Now it's a double meaning in the title as well, because obviously it's an illustrated book, drawn across borders, but also, what has compelled these refugees to move across borders? They've been drawn to other countries, and in turn as well, we, the reader, have also been drawn in to we're invited to sort of share and empathise in their experience.
Very smart.
Absolutely. So another very clever and very powerful moving example. So there's 3 highlights for Year 7 to 9.
Great. That sounds really good.
They do, don't they? They do. Strong ones this episode.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to give you my 3 now for older readers, 10 to 13, and I'm going to start with Lessons by Ian McEwan. Now, I've seen this described as a tour de force that takes in the key political events of the post-war world. And basically, it is the story of one man's life from when he's a very young boy in boarding school all the way to pretty much now, starting in the 50s. And it's all about how he deals with social political upheavals, how it changes his life, how his life might have been different if the backdrop of his life had been different, which I think is going to be a really interesting read, particularly thinking about what's happened in the last few years, you know, and this runs up till pretty much now. So I think the pandemic is a part of this story, and it's about how he deals with that and how it reflects, you know, the changes he makes and the things that could have happened that didn't, or things like that. So
the idea that the personal and the political are the same.
Kind of, yeah. So I think if you're someone that's really interested in history and how, you know, big global events can shape your life, this is a really interesting one, because it starts post-war, which obviously shaped a lot of people's way of living to now. So I think it's going to be quite a sprawling read. But if you know Ian McEwan, he's, you know, kind of a master of the human story. He's very good at that.
Oh, so, he's a great. He's a modern day.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically,
So you know, something new from him is very exciting, and this sounds
always.
really good.
Epic.
Yeah. My next one is Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. Now, this is a reimagining of the Medusa story. Natalie Haynes is very good at sort of retelling these famous stories. She wrote all about the Trojan War and the women involved in that, and she's got a few in her remit up to this point. But this one's quite exciting because I think Medusa is a really interesting story, because I think she's a character everyone knows, but I think the way she's been framed in stories is not necessarily true to how her original tale might have been, and she's very much been painted as a villain. And so I think this sort of attempts to reframe that a little bit, which will be an interesting read. Not too dissimilar to Pat Barker that did Medusa recently, but that was more for younger readers. This is the same version, but a little bit older. So yeah, I'm interested to see how she sort of tells us the story of Medusa. There's a quote in the front here, which is really good. It says, "So to mortal men we are monsters. Because of our fight, our strength, they fear us, so they call us monsters."
Oh, yeah.
That kind of sums up everything you need to know.
I get it's all like reclaiming the narrative and saying they're defining us. This is our chance to redefine it.
Yes. So really interesting one about history of women and all that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
And my last one I don't have on me, as it hasn't arrived, but it is a book called Portable Magic by Emma Smith, who is going to be doing a pop talk soon. So I kind of had to talk about her. But this is basically a book on the history of books. Not on the history of stories, but on the history of the books themselves. And it focuses on the production and the history of books as a physical object. And it's all about our relationship with books throughout history and how people have sort of consumed and accessed books throughout time. So it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. But also, you know, how books can mean something to us as a physical object just as much as the story, you know, like a childhood comfort or something that reminds us of a time and place. So I think it's going to be a really interesting, like, track through.
Yeah, it's a very good point, because obviously a book, it's a vessel for an idea. It's, you know, it's not just an impersonal thing. And how it's bound, and obviously don't judge a work by its cover. How it's presented is very important. So.
And the printing process is so interesting in the past, you know, like how books were physically made and how that changed and how expensive they used to be and how that will change it. So I think there's going to be a lot in there in terms of just the book itself as, you know, as an object. So look out for that one, because I think it's going to be really
absolutely. And do look out for the pop talk as well,
yes.
Which I believe is just after half term. So look out for that too. Okay, right, so as I said at the start, we sort of have shaken up the format of Off the Shelf a little, and here's our first new feature. It's basically Off the Shelf Classic, in which we talk about sometimes a well-known, sometimes a not so well-known classic work from the past that we would like to draw your attention to. And this episode we're going to talk about The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now the reason we picked this is, as well as it being an amazing book, is that, believe it or not, incredibly, it is 30 years old this year. 30 years old. 30 years ago this was published. And this is not the 30-year anniversary edition here, but a 30-year anniversary edition has been published by Penguin. Now, this book, I mean, I'll give you a detailed plot, but it's essentially, it's a classic murder mystery in reverse. Because there's not so much a whodunit as a why done it, because we know who did it right at the start. were revealed, and then it unveils, and it features a series of classic students at a very prestigious and elite American university, and basically they're very cerebral, and they use their intellectual, high-minded ideas to justify murder.
What they've done.
Murder, yes, murdering one of their own number, their own little tight-knit group. So, and then, but so they use intellect to justify it, but then when the realities of, in our everyday existence, the reality of what they've done, when it hits home, things basically start to unravel pretty quickly. As they would. As they would. I mean, how couldn't they?
Yeah.
How couldn't they? So what makes this book so special? I think there's too many reasons. I can't possibly list them all. We need to do another video just to tell you all the reasons. But for me, I think it's a really good, clever deconstruction of the university experience because it can be very glamorized and overhyped. It is a formative experience to go to university, leaving home for the first time. But it actually says, well, there can be an ugly side to that, especially if you're feeling like a bit of an estranged outsider, which Richard, the main character and narrator of this, does. What it's like to always feel like you're on the outside looking in. And it always feels like he does. And, the secret history, the word secret is a key one there, because, we always feel like we kept at arm's length, but it's done in a very clever way. But it's also that it is a long book, but it's also a real page turner. I mean, when I read this the first time, I just could not put it down. I remember actually running for a bus whilst reading this. I got to finish this. I got to finish this. So it's just so cool. It's just a brilliant book. So 30 years old. So happy birthday, Secret History, and do check it out. It's a fantastic book to read. Okay, so next up, not a new feature. We've had this before. It's time for our special guest. Now, this episode, our special guest is a teacher from the English department, Mr. Allen, and so he's going to tell you all about his some of his favourite reads and his general interests. So, over to you, Mr. Allen.
So, a recent read that I have enjoyed, and I spoke about this actually on the 10-year anniversary of Litsog, is Ellis Shafak's novel Island of Missing Trees. It is a beautiful novel that follows 3 separate time zones, but also how love is monitored, or how love is accessed in those time zones. So you start with post-colonial Cyprus and this idea of a secret relationship, because there is an individual who is Muslim and an individual who is Christian, and therefore there is conflict in their love, and they are not able to show that. One is Turkish and one is Greek as well. So they have a real struggle to find a time where they can actually be together, and that causes rifts in their relationship. But it's not only heterosexual love, there is a love between 2 of the main guys in the novel as well, which is a really powerful story of how their love is stronger than the war that is currently in Cyprus at that point. And then you come to modern day, and you have the daughter of the couple. You're introduced to her first, so there's no plot spoilers there. And her struggle with her identity and who she is, and her dual heritage, and her way of moving away from Cyprus into this British world. And we're thrown into this really modern London where there's social media. So the contrast between the pressure of social media and then everything that's happening in post-colonial Cyprus is beautifully written. But the one thing that really stands out for me on this, and why it's been nominated for so many prizes, is actually its compungible narrative. So there are 3 different storytellers, one of whom is the tree itself. Now, obviously, as we know, trees live for hundreds and hundreds of years, so they are able to narrate all of these different relationships and what they've experienced over that time. So a beautiful read I would highly recommend. My childhood read. Now, I have to admit, I love Harry Potter, and I've always loved Harry Potter. When I was younger, it was something that really interested me in the world building. And recently, the people of Mina Lima, who did the illustrations and designs for the film, have started releasing these wonderful copies of Harry Potter. So, for example, you have the letter that Harry receives when he first gets his invite to Hogwarts, and as we go through, there's just different designs, different beautiful moments, and it just helps bring this world that J.K. Rowling has created to life. And actually, the reason I first got into Harry Potter was my sister read the first one to me, and for her 30th birthday not that long ago, she asked for 30 books from the 30 people she loved the most. And I obviously gifted the Harry Potter Philosopher's Stone, and it's just something that in our family, if it's winter and it's a groggy day, we like to sit down, watch Harry Potter when I'm visiting my parents or whoever it may be. And it just takes me back in time, and it makes me realise why I fell in love with reading in the first place and why I'm in the job I'm in today. So I know Harry Potter comes into some of its criticism, but the books are incredible. Vastly overrated. This may come across as somewhat controversial as it is perceived as a classic, but Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Now, the biggest issue for me here is it doesn't have an identity. It is either a romance or a gothic. And I say that because the gothic idea is that we're in the isolation, we're in the Yorkshire moors, we have our frightened female, we have our strong male, and there's all this, the gothic conventions that you would expect to see of the time period. But then you have this integrated romance story as well. And for me, personally, there's too much of a crossover. So Heathcliff, who is the lead male character, he faces no resistance in the entire story. And I think to actually, so for example, in Island of Missing Trees, they have to overcome certain difficulties and they have to overcome different ways of people looking at them and how they're perceived. But here, Heathcliff has almost free reign because he is seen as this idealistic man, and although he has obviously all these worst qualities, there is still that idea that he is at the forefront of everything. And I think if he was able to face some more ridicule or some more, as I say, resistance from either Kathy or any of the other characters, then we would certainly see a more engaging, a more trifle sort of relationship between the two. Now, obviously there are some beautiful parts in here, the description of heartache, but also the description of landscape, lots of other descriptions. You can't question Emily Bronte's story writing, but I think the characters, the lack of identity in the book, I think it is something, personally for me, that I shan't be reading again. So unfortunately I don't have the book with me today, so I've actually lent it to one of my friends to read, but it's called Hypothermia. It's by Indra Dasson, who is a Scandinavian, I believe Finnish, but I will double check that, author, and it is a crime thriller set in the winter of Scandinavian winter. And the idea is that there is a body found under the ice, and they need to try and discover whether this was suicidal, whether it was caused by other people in her village. And then there is this, almost, if you've seen Baptiste, is very similar to that idea that actually someone comes in, a detective who's outside of the village, again seen as that outsider, and then it's their discovery, they're learning the secrets of the village as the novel continues, and we're learning at the same time with them. So there might be something that suddenly comes as a surprise to you because we've built this character in our head to be idealistic or perfect, and actually there's a deep-rooted secret there that the detective starts to uncover. So if you like your crime and if you like your thriller, but you want it in a almost different setting and a different location, then Hypothermia by Indra Dasson is a certain recommendation of mine. My 3 desert island books. Now, the first one is just one of my favourite all-time novels, The Great Gatsby. I think the way that the characters come to life in the party scene and that longing that our character Gatsby has to almost find his purpose in life as well as his partner in life, and that he's willing to go to the ends of the world for her and for that connection and that love, I think is so awe-inspiring and powerful. And then that paired with this beautiful description of how people present themselves, and that image and reputation is more important than values or anything that we consider valuable today. It's all about the image, and I think actually that contrast between a lost soul and someone that wants to be seen as a completed individual really helps bring this novella to life. So that would certainly be my first, because I can read that over and over and over again. The second would be, it's not actually this one, but my partner, we first met, and on our first date we said, right, we're going to bring a book that we really enjoy, and we're going to share it with each other, and then we're going to come back for another meeting and we will discuss the book. So I gave her Great Gatsby and she gave me The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. So this is the sequel, because again I've lent the first one out, so the next person you meet in heaven. But I would really, really recommend this book because it allows you to have a different idea of faith. Now, Mitch Albom, he is one of my favourite authors because he also writes some non-fiction, and he said about how he in his youth, he grew up in a Jewish family but started to question his faith when he reached about 13, 14. And his story, it's called Faith, his non-fiction book, is about him exploring the different possibilities and what afterlife could look like and what it means in different religions. And although The 5 People You Meet in Heaven does have a religious aspect to it, he is never judgmental, he's never forceful with it. What he says is, there's exploration and there's hope, and he looks at all the different ways that people could experience afterlife, and it's a really heartwarming story that I've read a few times now, and would highly recommend it. The last one is Lord of the Flies, and the reason behind that is you want to know what not to do on an island. For those who haven't read it, it is William Golding. It's an absolute classic, but it's about a group of British schoolboys that are on a deserted island, and it leads to chaos, and there's violence, and there's power struggles, and there's manipulation, and it's all about how they lose their identity, and they go from being civilized children to savages, as Golden describes them. And I would not like to be a savage on a desert island, so that is something I would read over and learn from as I'm there. So yes, the 3, I take Great Gatsby, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, and Lord of the Flies.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Just to round all that off, I've got a little bit of book trivia for you. Did you know that in 1936, John Steinbeck's dog Toby ate his very first manuscript of his famous book Of Mice and Men, and he had to start it all over again? He wrote to his agent, "I was pretty mad, but the poor little fellow must have been acting critically."
There you go, he didn't like it.
Dog ate his homework.
The dog was the original critic and made sure that the book turned out good in the end, so thank you, Toby. And just to finish off, we have a new competition, and it's called Who's Reading? And essentially we're going to show you a picture of a teacher reading a book with a Facebook screen. Miss Ria's going to demonstrate for us, okay? Mm-hmm. And you need to tell us who it is. So, tell us, who's reading? Okay, and to enter this competition, you can either email us, sslibrarianteam@servanthigh.com, or place your entry in the entrance box, and we will announce who is reading, plus the winner, in the next episode of Off the Shelf. So, until then, take care, keep reading. Bye.
Bye.